Your dreams are bigger, bolder, and more badass than the life you're living now, but something just keeps getting in the way. Join certified coach and former therapist Diane Wingert for the Driven Woman podcast. She'll show you how to get rid of whatever is holding you back so you can stop spinning your wheels and up-level your life. Get ready to hop in and buckle up. This is the Driven Woman podcast, and we're heading for the fast lane.
Hey, and welcome back to the Driven Woman podcast. You know, I promised you that season 2 would be full of all kinds of new things. And today we are bringing you the first client success story. I hear so many myths and rumors about why ADHD means you can't be successful, especially as a woman. So I can't wait to start introducing you to some of my clients who are living proof that you can be a bold, brilliant, badass, and very successful woman with ADHD, including my client Jen, who you'll meet today, who has a doctorate in occupational therapy. And she will share with you how she really is coming to understand and embrace her ADHD, which, by the way, she didn't even know she had until the final year of her doctorate. Jen and I will talk about her sensitivity. We'll talk about perfectionism, hiding, imposter complex, and we'll talk about how she's making some changes in her business to make it more ADHD friendly. We'll also chat about some of the practical things that Jen learned through coaching with me and has incorporated into her life, including a morning routine, energy management, and habit stacking. Now, before I bring her on and have her share her story with you, I want to share with you our latest review. This one comes all the way from Sweden, from Natasha, who says, "Do you want to become successful? If yes, listen to Diane's podcast. Not many women talk about being an entrepreneurial woman with ADHD, but with or without a diagnosis, you will learn how to grow, last, and succeed. It's an excellent podcast. Thank you, Diane." Well, thank you, Natasha. And I just love connecting with like-minded and like-brained women from all over the world, because ADHD is not just in the US. And as we can see from Natasha in Sweden, she somehow found her way to this podcast and it connects with her. So I'm excited for you to connect with my client, Jen, and for her to share her client success story about being an entrepreneurial woman with ADHD. Here we go. So I've been really looking forward to reconnecting with you. And before we get into your story and your struggles and your strengths and all the wonderful changes that you have been making, tell our audience who you are and what you do.
Okay. My name is Jen, and I have my doctorate in occupational therapy. So I'm a practicing occupational therapist.
So in case there's anybody who is listening who doesn't know, what does someone who have a doctorate in occupational therapy do? Because a lot of people know what a medical doctor is, and they know maybe what a physical therapist is, but an occupational therapist, they might not be so sure.
Yeah, so the kind of textbook answer would be helping people do what they need to do and want to do. And that just looks so different per person. The cool thing about it is that it is really comprehensive and individualized. So we take a sensory perspective, looking at your motor skills, executive functioning. How does everything in your life play into, how you're processing things and what you're able to do?
And you work with pediatrics, so you work with kiddos, big and small. And it strikes me, Jen, that women with ADHD, especially gifted women with ADHD and those who love to learn, like you do, are often drawn towards things that are both complicated and diverse. So we have talked in the past that you really like the really complicated patients. If what they have is very straightforward, it's just boring and you're not terribly interested. but also that every day is different and every patient is different. So you get to bring a lot of creativity to every one of your patients. Is that fair to say?
Yep.
What do you think ultimately drew you to the profession? And also what made you want to go all the way to the PhD level? Because I don't think a PhD is required to do what you do.
So I actually didn't know I had ADHD until the last year of my doctorate. So there, I'm sure there is a lot of psychology behind why I wanted to help people be successful in their life and figure out how to do that. And I have my clinical doctorate, which is different than a PhD because a PhD is a slightly longer process.
Mm-hmm.
Why I decided to do it, a few reasons. I think one is a very, I guess, society accepted answer of, it looks better. But then I also think there's also the side of what, I'm like, how honest do I get? I think
I want to make sure I understand. So you're saying you got the PhD because it looks better because a PhD is a clinical doctorate. Sorry, a clinical doctorate is more impressive to others because it's more advanced.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think that there's that, and even just proving to myself that I can do it, there's a little bit of that side of it. And then the cool part of it is like during the clinical doctorate part, you get to really, kind of have a specialty. And so that's where I really went into studying pediatrics and stuff like that. So yeah, it's multifaceted.
Did you have struggles as a kid that made you identify with kids who have special needs?
So it's really interesting because I feel, so it's hard because my initial answer is no, because I learned how to stare at the teacher and smile and nobody knew that I wasn't paying attention, and I was smart enough to get like fine grades. So I do think that I would get really scared sometimes if I was called on because I knew that I would kind of go.
Not all there.
Yeah. And I remember staring at the board and it's like, okay, pay attention. But then I think it is kind of the fish that's in the water and doesn't know it's in the water. It's I don't think that, until I really knew, I didn't actually realize how, that is a challenge that not everybody experiences.
Yes. It sounds like, Jen, that you knew you were struggling to focus and to pay attention. I mean, you were literally coaching yourself while you're in class. And you also knew that it was expected that you would focus and pay attention. So even though you were having trouble doing that, you knew how to pretend that you were so that I guess you could blend in and you wouldn't have a problem. And so I guess what we do is we hide. We hide from others, we hide from ourselves, and most of the time that causes a little bit of anxiety because we are hoping we don't get caught. And it makes a lot of sense that if you didn't really have to pay attention and you were smart enough to still do well, that hiding was kind of functional. But I can say from my own experience and that with you and many of my other clients, eventually it catches up with you because even though you had plenty of evidence that you were smart and creative and had many wonderful abilities and skills, that hiding does take a toll over time. And it's almost like what I see, and I'd love it if you talk about a little bit, is that it's hard to take any of your accomplishments seriously. It's like, I know that I have good grades. I know that people tell me I'm smart. I know that I'm accomplishing things, but I kind of don't really feel like I earned them because I wasn't really all there. So I don't really feel secure in my competency. And I know that that's something that you and I have talked about, and it's an ongoing struggle, isn't it?
Yes. The thing that like with you saying all of this, what it makes me think of is how much hiding, and in so many different ways that I didn't even realize, and even just like in social settings, in life pursuits, even just, yeah, with friends. And that's the part that is so surprising and has been such a part of the interesting journey, is that there's such an imposter complex and such a fear of like, if you know me, then you're going to see something that you don't like. And there is such, yeah, fear there. But I think that the thing that I have really been discovering is that you can be yourself or you cannot be yourself. But when you're not yourself, that doesn't mean people are going to like you. And when you are yourself, it turns out that you do attract the right people and you do get in flow, and then you do these fucking amazing things. And then it's just so much better. But it is so interesting that it is a process. And
it is a process. And you know what? But you get to go to the head of the class because you were obviously taking notes. You're right. It's like, it's kind of funny when you finally figure it out and then you realize, why did I ever think anything different? It's like, in order to get people to like us, we pretend to be someone we aren't. And we don't seem to figure out that that means we have to keep on maintaining that charade indefinitely. Because if you attracted people to you by pretending to be someone you weren't, once they figure out that's not who you are, why would they stick around? So how much better would it be for you to just be you, let your freak flag fly, and see
yes.
and see who wants that, and then the ones that do, you can't get rid of. Like, they like you for you, and some of them are going to be ADHD themselves. I find that now that I'm really honest with myself and I am owning who I am, not hiding, not pretending, not lying, not explaining, justifying, excusing, approval seeking, all the rest of that nonsense that I did for so many years, that I may not attract as many people, but I'm attracting the right ones. And they either tend to be other like-minded and like-brained women like you, or enthusiasts. So my life is now populated by those with ADHD and what I call ADHD enthusiasts. And those are the neurotypicals who don't have the kind of brain we have, but they find us delightful, amusing, fascinating company, and they just want to come to the party, even if they don't understand how it works. And I'm like, I'm okay with that, you know?
Yes.
So I have a couple questions about some things that we discussed when we were working together. And I understand that you have continued to make strides in these areas. And I think for people listening, that would be really interesting to hear. One of the things that we worked on is a morning routine. And I know I can be really annoying to my clients with all my talk about rituals, routines, and habits. But I just feel that our brains, although very fast moving, get tired easily. So we want to conserve our mental and emotional energy on decisions that really matter. And all the decisions that we can literally take off the menu by putting them on autopilot, then we conserve that mental and emotional energy for the important stuff. So that's why I'm so fond of rituals, habits, and routines. And in your case, we developed a couple habits for you to do things early in the day instead of hoping you would find the time for them later. A couple that come to mind are, did I take my medication? So I'd like you to talk about that. And then worrying all day about when am I going to find time to exercise, and then not finding time to exercise. So how have those things changed?
Yeah. So I remember when we talked about, what you introduced as habit stacking. So pairing your habits, and when you did initially bring that up, my initial reaction was like, ugh, like that sounds awful. Like, I don't want to do that.
I don't want to. Don't make me.
Yeah. But that was one of the first things that one of the first shifts that our work together had changed. And that is something that I'm grateful for every day. So the first thing I do in the morning is I go pee. And so what your advice was take your medication, right after, have your glass of water there in the bathroom. And so that's sort of my daily routine. It's going to the bathroom, taking my medication, contacts, coffee, Avi. Yeah. And it's great because it just cuts out any chance of forgetting, which then would lead to kind of lollygagging around. And I'm like, oh, wait, have I taken it? I should take it. Wait, but this one other thing. And so that really starts off the day so consistently and well. So that is the first thing. And then with regards to the rest of my morning routine, my best friend and I, we live together and we exercise in the morning now. So we've been doing that for the past 4 months, like at least 4 days a week. And so we do beach body. So yeah, and it's just really fun because we do have the accountability of there's going to be someone waiting for you. So your butt better be up. And then it's like, there are days where it sucks. And that's when we go in the plank position and just start cracking up and then fall on the ground. And yeah, so that's pretty funny. And my neighbor downstairs was like, well, we kind of yelled to him the other day and we're like, we're sorry. And he's like, well, I'm just glad you guys aren't that fit because it only lasts for 40 minutes. So we're like, all right, well, great.
That's a backhanded compliment. Well, I just remember that you like to exercise. You're committed to exercising. You're absolutely convinced of exercise's ability to what I like to call drain the swamp, and really help you get your brain game on. But you didn't have a consistent routine or a consistent habit. So literally with all the clients that you had, and I want to go into talking about work in a second, but with all the clients that you had and all the running around that you were doing, it was literally I think half your mental energy on any given day was spent, when am I going to work out? How am I going to fit it in? And if there was a lot of traffic on the way home, or you forgot something and had to go back, or a client session ran long and then you were too tired, it was oh, here we go again. So I'm so excited to hear that you're doing it regularly in the morning where it's going to do the most good. And taking the medication right after you pee, it's done.
Yeah, totally. It saves so much rumination, decision fatigue, should I, shouldn't I? And then the guilt if you don't. So it just has really had a cascading positive impact on just so many facets of my life. So yeah.
You know what I think is so funny about that? Of course, I love client success stories, obviously. But what I always think is funny is that when I'm teaching a concept to somebody and they aren't having it, I don't get upset. Nobody, when I say, okay, we're going to work on morning routine, we're going to work on transition rituals, the brain doesn't like change. We do not like trying new things, and we don't like facing the possibility of disappointment because we try something and it didn't work or we couldn't do it. So your brain is going to fight kicking and screaming for you to stay exactly the way you are, whether you're happy or not. So I'm always excited when people say, I don't want to, that sounds boring. But then 3 months later, they're rocking it. I'm like, all righty then, it's okay if I didn't get the satisfaction of seeing it happen right then. It happened because you're a smart girl and it's a matter of, okay, I don't want to do this. Okay, acknowledged. I'm not going to hate myself for that. But how could I want to?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way I could make myself want to? Or is there another way I could think about it that would actually attract me to the thing? Or could I somehow trick myself into doing it? Or could I reward myself? We always have to try different things and experiment with our brain because the only thing that doesn't work at all is giving up. So you just stay at it. But speaking of staying at it, you have an interesting position. You work as an independent contractor. And for a long time before we met, you were driving all over town, going from your patients' homes, one after the other, all day long. And we're really working a lot. I would say overworking to the point where you were exhausted. You weren't enjoying your job most of the time, or at least some of the time. You felt frustrated, fatigued. You didn't have a lot of time for self-care, and you had almost zero time for fun and friendships. So over these 8 months, we've all been forced to spend a lot more time at home, which has allowed you to start working with most of your patients virtually. And my understanding is that has changed everything. Tell us how.
Well, one thing that you helped give me insight on is how sensitive I am. And because I'm an empath, being in traffic and loud noises throughout the day, just getting to homes, that alone was was really draining. And now working from home, it's like I'm able to conserve that energy and working with the parents to really teach them kind of concepts and bigger things that have a bigger impact. Because one thing that you also mentioned was because I was working so much, I didn't have time to do the things that were meaningful to me. And that included learning and, getting into the grind. You kind of just like, okay, well, I'm just going to do instead of really stepping back and looking at the more strategic ways to have a longer term plan. And so
we just we're running on the treadmill.
Yep.
And instead of I always think about the treadmill image because, when running on a treadmill, we're not actually going anywhere, but we're consuming time and energy, and it feels effortful. I mean, if you're doing it for exercise, that's one thing, but you're never going to actually get anywhere on a treadmill. You're going to just use up your time and use up your energy, but you aren't going to be in a different place than when you began. Whereas if you go for a run outside, you're actually going somewhere. And I think, for you, you have very high standards. You have very high level of service to your patients and their families. You expect a lot of yourself and you really deliver. And between that and all the driving and stuff, you were just so exhausted that you really didn't have the mental space to really think about where is this all going? What's the bigger picture of my life? Is this what I want to be doing in a year or 5 years? And if not, how am I going to get from here to wherever that might be? And how would I even know if I'm okay? If I'm literally just running on this treadmill as fast as I can, just trying to keep from falling flat on my face and getting thrown against the back wall. So not driving all over town sounds like has been very good for you because it's reduced that frenetic kind of activity, maybe giving you a little bit more mental space. And what have you done with that?
Okay, so there's a few things. I think the first thing is really doing the self-care in the morning. There is no excuse, and there is that accountability to myself. And I can see how when I prioritize myself, what that difference means throughout the day. It's so annoying when people say you have to put your oxygen mask on first. And it does seem like, yeah, sure, fine. But then it is just so true. You cannot show up for people when you haven't, if your tank is empty, you have nothing to give. I think there's such a level of guilt that we can feel as women, or feel some sort of shame because if it's, oh, well, I'm used to maybe not falling short sometimes or disappointing.
So we are very prone to overdoing because we have that sort of long-term underlying sense of not enoughness, And so, and I think you were definitely prone to that, but it's shifted, hasn't it? I mean, I can see it.
Yeah. So that has shifted. And so, now I am going to start doing more like creative work and working more specifically with individuals with ADHD and like, families with ADHD. And I'm shifting from working in a lot of like institutional models where it's like, the 50-minute session, and now dreaming bigger of like, that 50-minute one-on-one with a kid, that actually doesn't have long-lasting benefits because the parents don't really understand what's happening. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, we need to understand. They need to understand why is this happening so that when, because there's so many times where it's like, if a child looks at someone and they're like, oh, they, maybe say something that's inappropriate. And then the parent looks at them and is like, oh my gosh, my kid's bad. Or, it's like, no, this is the way it's working. This is what's happening. Here are ways that we can design the environment. And it needs to be consistent. It's not just like, a magic wand of coming in. So anyways, it is daring to dream and take a step to create something that will actually work better for the people that I work with and something that fits my life better. And it's scary because it's against the grain because that's not just what's typically done and expected. And so it's scary. So
Well, I think I really appreciate you saying that on so many levels because the truth is that we're different. We've always been different and we've always known we were different. And I think why I love working with people I work with, people like you, is that by the time I meet my clients, they have been trying for years, if not decades, to conform to the norm, to force themselves into the configuration of whatever box they were attracted to. Like in my case, I wanted to help people with their minds, and I became a psychotherapist. And you wanted to help people in a more holistic way. You became an occupational therapist. One of my clients is, actually several of my clients are physicians. Another's a lawyer, another's a writer. And all of us have tried to conform to the norm. And when we've been successful according to the world, we got the A's, we got the degree, we got the job, we got the promotion. The degree to which we've been successful in doing things in the way of the world, if you will, which is to say the way of the neurotypical, we have been approved of, we have been accepted, we have been allowed to feel like we belong, we fit in. Maybe we've even advanced. Maybe we've even been highly successful. But I believe, Jen, that we have done so at an expense to our self-respect, our self-esteem, and our self-acceptance on a very deep level. Because as we talked about before, it requires hiding. It requires pretending. It requires lying to ourselves and others. And I think oftentimes we suppress the most special, unique, gifted, magical attributes that we have in order to do things the quote unquote right way. So I really try to encourage all of my clients, especially the ones like you that are highly sensitive, empathic, gifted healers, to find their own path and to create the practice or the business, including the number of hours you work per day, the number of patients or clients you see, the length of time you work with them, the length of time you work with them over months. Like, for example, one of my clients was in the 50-minute model, like you and I come from, and really just felt so frustrated over time that the results would be very short-lived. And then the next session, they would be literally starting over again. And so she spoke with her supervisor because she was working in a group practice that was owned by someone else. I think it would be much more impactful if I would see the clients for a 90-minute session every other week instead of this 50-minute session every week. And no, that's not the way it's done. That's not the quote unquote standard of care. That's not how we do it here, and blah, blah, blah. And you know how it goes. Well, eventually she got frustrated with the bureaucracy and all that. And she just didn't feel like she was able to do the kind of work that she really felt proud of. And that was the reason she went into the field. So she branched out on her own. And she now does, actually, she realized even the 2-hour sessions were not optimal. Now she does clinical intensives where she has the patient come in for a 4-hour half day with several breaks, but they make so much progress that she only needs to see them a handful of times and then they're done. She never, ever would have discovered that if she would have kept on trying to fit the mold. And I think that you are starting to realize that you've got some creative out of the box ideas that deserve a chance to, get a little mileage on them.
Yeah. And I think it is not only, if it doesn't work for us, then it is like, it doesn't work for people whose mind works similarly. So it is like, who are you doing it for then at that point? It's like, not for the person, not for yourself. It's just, a waste.
What do you think is the scariest thing? Because this is something I think everyone listening faces. Why do you think it's so scary to be who we are and let the world know about it?
So I think there are a few things. One, I think sometimes the maybe accommodations that we need, we don't feel that they're okay to ask for because that's putting other people out. So that can be hard. And I think without ever hearing anyone else do it, sometimes we don't have the language for it. But once we hear someone do it, then it's, oh, that actually wasn't bad. And you can see that like the person receiving it, when you're being genuine and really coming from a place. So like with my mom, I need an accommodation. She knows that I'll probably be 30 minutes to an hour late. And she has that on my IEP now. And she's like, no, I already know. And so that's a huge part.
Like feeling guilty for asking for accommodations, for feeling like guilty for having any kind of special needs because it puts people out. But in your experience, it doesn't very often, does it? We just think it will.
Yeah. And what has been so amazing the last month of really, for me, just in my personal life, also recognizing how it feels hard because sometimes I will feel, a lot of things because the world just like does impact me. I'm pretty sensitive. And so I don't want to impact other people negatively. But then even just having the words, okay, I'm just going through something. I just need some space, but it's not anything to do with you. That also helps because I think it goes back to the hiding. Like before, it was like I would just hide and I would just like text like, okay, have a great day. And like my friend's like, what the heck? Like that, this isn't you. Like, why are we disconnecting? But it is realizing that when you are disconnecting from people, that's actually hurtful to them. And so I think that we think that hiding will help the people that we love, but really it doesn't.
No, and it doesn't help us. And it also, like you've heard me say a million times, all behavior is habit forming. So even though we might feel like this is really awkward, like I know we've talked about this where not wanting to say yes to an invitation on the spot because you're afraid. Remember, we talked about this quite a bit. Like you get it, someone says, hey, let's do whatever. Let's go to happy hour, socially distanced happy hour on Friday. And they ask you on Tuesday. And like you, for a moment, you have that brief moment of excitement and you want to say yes. And you also know that would make them happy if you say yes. And you'd like to think that when Friday rolls around, that it actually would be a yes and that you would actually want to go. But you would get so depleted by your work and your patients and the driving and all that, that by Friday, you would just want to go home at 4:00 and dive under your covers, right? So that doesn't seem like a normal, healthy, young, single woman of your age. And you don't want to explain it to people like, oh, I know I said I would, but now I don't want to. It's not you. It all feels so awkward. So we just tell ourselves, I'll just like forget. But what I'm learning is that when we know who we really are and we decide that it's okay to be who we are and to be how we are, that the next step is letting other people in on the secret and then being willing to notice that it's okay with them too. I think it's been one of the things that's been the most transformative for me is to realize how much of my life was dominated by stories I told myself about what other people would think, when in fact that never came true. And I prevented them from knowing who I really was the whole time I was telling myself those stories.
Yeah.
So what is going to be next for you as we're wrapping up? I know you have some interesting plans ahead of you, and I would love to help you make them come true. So let's talk about them for just a minute.
Okay. Well, I am going to be doing virtual OT sessions with families who are interested in learning more about designing the environment for their kids to help with attention and any sensory needs. So, fidgeting, stuff like that, and really just taking a holistic standpoint, but really teaching the families how and why things are happening. So I am going to be doing that. And then on the side, I have created my Instagram account so that I'm not quite sure what that's going to turn into, but I hope to continue to build a community of people that have magical minds and think differently, because I think that it is in knowing that seeing other people do things and knowing that's okay and giving yourself permission. I think that that's how we can continue supporting people being vulnerable and not conforming to maybe what a standard.
I love it. Basically, you're talking about embracing the neurodiversity movement and holding up your part of the banner that says we're different and we're okay with that. Like really making the most of the brain you have instead of trying to make it into the brain you thought you were supposed to have. I think, as I love your term magical minds, because some of the most innovative, creative, and revolutionary thinkers, the ones who will literally change the world for the better, not just for brains like ours, but for everyone, are the ADHD brains, the brains with autism spectrum, the neurodiverse people, the dyslexics. It's the people whose brains are different that see the world differently and have different solutions to problems. So I am going to be very excited to be one of your followers, and I would love to tell other people about how they can find you. So I will be putting all of that in the show notes. And I hope that you will come back and tell us even more in the future when this goes viral, because I tell you, with all the kiddos at home, for however long this quarantine situation is going to last, all families are struggling. But families who have kids with special attention needs and sensory needs, they really require expert assistance, the kind that someone like you can give, because now the parent has to be the teacher all the time.
Yeah.
And
learning should
everybody,
be fun.
right?
Yes.
Learning should be fun for littles and for bigs. So thank you so much for coming back and sharing your thoughts with us and letting the audience of The Driven Woman see that you can go as far as you want to go with ADHD if you have the passion and you have the drive. And anybody that tells you otherwise, unfollow, unfriend, stop listening.
Yeah. And I do think that every good leader and therapist should or will benefit from having a coach. And so I strongly endorse that you have been such a strong leader that has helped, change the trajectory of my future. And so I'm very grateful. And I do think you can do great things for all the ADHD leaders.
Well, I can't wait to see you as a leader in your own right. So I'm really looking forward to that because the world needs you.
All right.
Thanks for coming back.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Bye for now.
Bye.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying listening to the Driven Woman podcast and looking forward to each new episode every Tuesday. Are you ready to take our relationship to the next level? Visit my website at dianewingertcoaching.com. I have a weekly blog. There's a quiz you can take to find out what your ADHD signature strength is, and some other freebies like the 6 Steps to ADHD Mastery or the Driven Woman Roadmap Fast Track to Success. And if you're ready to get serious about going from spinning to winning and taking yourself from driven but distracted to focused, fired up, and flame retardant, you should definitely sign up for a free consultation. We'll spend 30 minutes talking about where you are, where you want to be, and whatever's getting in the way. I won't try to sell you if you're not right for coaching and I'm not the right one for you. But if you are, this might be the best way to make 2021 your best year ever. Want to hear from someone who's actually worked with me? Have a listen to my client, Rachel.
I didn't have you helping me along the way to understand a lot of this stuff. The meds would have been a waste for me, a complete and total waste. I would have had a little bit more energy maybe, but still the habits, whatever. There's no magic pill. It's always going to be something I'm going to have to work on. And I am understanding that and being okay with that and just kind of working through that and thinking and being intentional and stopping myself and doing all of the things for the first time in my life. I'm going to tell you right now, the meds have allowed me to slow stuff down enough that I've never been this effective at anything cognitive ever in my life. But I've also never had it explained to me by somebody who understands what's going on in my head either.
You've been listening to the Driven Woman podcast with Diane Wingert. Want more straight talk and strategy each week that will take you from spinning to winning? Don't forget to hit subscribe in your podcast player so you won't miss a single episode. Then head on over to the Driven Woman free and private Facebook group community. See you there.